Hey guys, it's Faye from SolarFlow and I am back with an all-new video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil energy read on Machine Gun Kelly and Megan Fox. We are going to be exploring both of their individual energies as well as their relational dynamic and exploring if they are in fact so-called twin flames. So if that sounds good to you, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. Now, even though they are a rather hot topic at this time, for anyone that is not familiar with who they are, I have some three-dimensional information that I acquired by going to their respective Wikipedia pages. So I'm first going to be sharing the 3D information on them, and then we're going to be doing a deep dive into their individual as well as their collective energies. So here we go. Machine Gun Kelly, real name Richard Colson Baker, is an American rapper, singer, songwriter, and actor. He released 4 mixtapes from 2007 until 2010 prior to signing with Puff Daddy's Bad Boy Records. He has achieved commercial success with songs on the Billboard Top 100 as well as going triple platinum. He has an estimated net worth of $25 million. Now, this is of course not the entirety of his Wikipedia page. I literally just copied the very first paragraph to give us an idea of who he is. Now, Megan Fox, again, this is not the entirety of her wiki page, is an American actress. Her breakout role was in 2007's film Transformers, and she was married to Brian Austin Green from 2010 until 2021, in which that time they had 3 kids together. Megan has an estimated net worth of $8 million. Now, these two met on the set of an indie thriller called Midnight in the Switchgrass in March 2020. Megan then appeared as Machine Gun Kelly's love interest in his music video for a song titled Bloody Valentine. Real life over here, you can hear the garbage trucks. Machine Gun Kelly proposed to Megan in January 2022. Good thing this is the part that's just 3D information that you could get if you Google them, and not like the reason that we're all here, for the real juicy behind the veil stuff. So Kelly proposed to Megan in January 2022, and they have notably been on and off on a number of occasions, but have also referred to one another as so-called twin flames. So let's see what their energy wanted to share with me. Machine Gun Kelly and Megan Fox are into some fucked up shit. But not to them, it isn't. To them, it's simply an expression of things deep inside of them and a longing to express it and give voice to it in the world. And finally, having found a partner they can feel safe to express it with. So to them, this fucked up shit is as natural as breathing is, as natural as a fish to water. But once you take that fish out of water, it dies. And try to add us to water without an oxygen tank, and we die. So, to an uncomplimentary outsider looking in, they seem to be into some fucked up shit, but to them, they're right at home. Now, energetically, they're both individually as well as collectively a little kooky. Like, they kind of dance to the beat of their own drummer, one could say. But while they both dance to the beat of their own drummer, the beat is different for both of them. So the reasons why they are kooky vary. So what was shown to me is that for Machine Gun Kelly, His sense of self and sense identity may not be something he shares verbally, but it is expressed through his appearances. First, he has a lot of tattoos. And as I have discussed previously on a video that I had done on the music industry, link down below if you have not yet seen it. I recommend going back and seeing it. Tattoos are a reflection of trauma that one has experienced. And so for Machine Gun Kelly, him having a lot of tattoos is an outward reflection and expression of the trauma that he himself has endured. So, but here's the thing. This is not someone that numbs out to their pain, but he is actually, in fact, rather in tune with it. But because he is not one to do talk therapy and to kind of like talk it out and explore his feelings in relation to it, his release valve, if you will, are his tattoos. It's his way of non-verbally sharing, but it is his way of actually, in fact, transmuting the trauma that the tattoos represent. And because the tattoos are such a prominent part of his body, this too is going to represent being a big part of his story and of his identity. So while he may verbally hide, one could say, because he's not a talk it out kind of a guy when it comes to trauma, he doesn't in fact hide from it, but he does share the darkness inside of him, but it's not through verbal communication. But he is in tune with it. He's not numbed himself out to it. His way of transmuting the darkness inside of him is through the proliferation of tattoos on his body. But in addition to his tattoos, also look at how he dresses for events. He is rather experimental with both his hair color, and he dresses a little bit out there as well. But this is the interesting thing. While his energy is kooky, he has a rather grounded energy. So him dressing out there, it's not because he's doing it for attention, no. Because Machine Gun Kelly leads a more internal and private life. So again, the fashion is a reflection of elements deep and internal inside of him that are hidden and are being expressed again in a non-verbal way, through the way in which he adorns his body and his hair, and he styles himself for events. It's not, in fact, for attention. He doesn't do it because he wants people to stop and stare and to look at him. It's his way of expressing things that are deep and internal to him. They're just expressed in a nonverbal way. They're expressed in a demonstrative, three-dimensional kind of a way. But interestingly enough, though he may not share verbally with the world, the way his energy had come into me was that he sure does with his friends and those that are closest to him. So while he expresses himself non-verbally to the world at large, he does do so with those closest to him, and they know and they see the so-called real Machine Gun Kelly. And because they do, and because he feels safe and comfortable enough in their presence to be himself, what was shown to me is that his love language is, one of his love languages is in fact, spending quality time with those that are closest to him. Friends, romantic partners. And we're going to talk more about love languages in a moment. And aside from being tattooed, which is his release valve of too much unexpressed pent-up energy and emotions, he may not necessarily like being touched. However, when he is in a relationship and he feels safe with his partner, he is very much into physical affection, touchy-feely. And while he does not necessarily verbally express himself to the world, he does it with his friends and his partner. So his most dominant love language traits are words of affirmation, spending quality time, and physical affection. But why am I choosing to discuss love languages at all? Aside from exploring what Machine Gun Kelly's love language is, and a little bit later on exploring what Megan's are as well. And it is because love languages are a thing. There have been books written about the 5 love languages. There are online quizzes that a person could take to identify what theirs are if they aren't sure, and to determine if a potential partner is going to be a good fit for you based on your love languages and theirs. So it's an actual thing out in the world. Let's take that and apply that to somebody like a Machine Gun Kelly. That is because, as we have ascertained, Machine Gun Kelly's love languages are positive affirmations and words of kindness, spending quality time with a partner, and physical affection. So those are his 3 most dominant love languages. Now let's say he was in a relationship with a woman and she had none of those 3. So let's say her love languages is buying him gifts and doing kind deeds for him. And he might be thinking, this is nice, this is great. But when he tries to give her physical affection, she doesn't want to be touched. So he might end up feeling like he is being rebuffed. And let's say he wants to spend quality time with her, but she would rather just like drop off a gift and be on her way. So when we are with a partner where the way in which we express love and the way in which we receive love may not necessarily be aligned, it can cause friction, especially in the long term. But when we choose a partner where our love languages may perhaps be more aligned, it may lead to better long-term happiness in a relationship. And there will certainly be the potential for a more long-lasting relationship as well. But let's get back to Machine Gun Kelly's energy. And what we see of him out in the world is actually a hidden release of his unconscious mind. And it is something deep inside of him coming to the fore, because his true identity is actually, in fact, hidden from the world. Until Megan came along. Now, before I explain why, let's explore a little bit about Megan's own internal energy. Megan Fox is considered to be a sex symbol. And because of the fact that she is a sex symbol, her energy is actually rather porous. Here's why. Her likeness and image is one of a sexy woman, thus leaving her open to both men and boys, and women as well, projecting their fantasies onto her. All of this projection, if it is not identified and cleared off of her own internal energy, may leave her feeling dysregulated, or like her energy has been siphoned off of her, making her feel tired, or erroneously her over-identifying with this part of herself and believing it's all that actually matters about her, to be a sexy woman. And outside of that, erroneously believing she doesn't have value. And to some extent, what we see playing out of her representation in the world is an indication of her being energetically porous and having her energy siphoned off of her. Because when she goes out and goes to events, she dresses rather provocatively. And she has also begun to have more and more noticeable cosmetic procedures being done to both her face as well as her body. Now, because some of her energy has been siphoned off of her with her sex symbol status, to be very energetically open to that extent, she is actually subjected to being influenced by the outside world and outside trends. And this then is going to explain why we see her doing more and more noticeable alterations to her physical appearance. So here in LA, where both Machine Gun Kelly and Megan Fox reside, it's like not a thing. It's like a complete non-event for people to have like minor cosmetic procedures done. Like everyone gets Botox done. It's like as common as getting like your hair trimmed. So that's not the kind of like procedures that I'm talking about. That's like a nothing burger kind of procedure. I'm talking about more where somebody is altering perhaps their bone structure, or they're really altering the appearance of their face, the shape of their face. So i.e., for example, having fillers put into maybe their cheekbones, fillers in their lips, maybe even getting like chin implants, having their nose resurfaced, having their nose done, having hip implants placed onto their body, doing like a Brazilian butt implant. Those are more the procedures that I'm kind of like speaking of, not like bleaching your teeth or changing your hair color or getting like Botox. Because out here in California, that's literally nothing. So this is what I'm referring to is a lot more noticeable procedures that are actually changing the way somebody's appearance is out on the world. And because she is so energetically porous because of her sex symbol status, she is energetically open to being influenced by those things. Which is why, for example, she is doing more and more noticeable procedures. She's a young woman. She doesn't, not that it's really anyone on the outside looking in, not that it's our place to say what somebody needs or doesn't need, right? Like if she feels like this is something she needs, then hey, you do you, boo, more power to you. But she's a young woman. She's like in her mid-30s. She's beautiful. So again, from an outsider looking in, one might say she doesn't need to have these procedures done. But again, because she's so energetically porous because of her sex symbol status, she is energetically open to the influences that are playing out on the world stage around her. And everybody, look at like what Bella Hadid did. She completely changed her face, and everybody is getting like these really, really big procedures, not like these little injectables. So she's really open to feeling that and feeling the influence and feeling like she then in turn needs to have them done herself. Now, this is also going to explain, this is my opinion, 2% personal opinion, because I did not see that she is being agendized. And this is why at the top of the video, I had also shared with you what their net worth is. Because $8 million, it's not a small sum of money, right? It's $8 million more than I have. It might be $8 million more than a lot of you guys have, right? But it's still $8 million. But it's not like the Brad Pitts of the world that are getting $20 million a picture. So, well, it's not like chump change. It's not exactly nothing either. But because it's not on the level of the Brad Pitts of the world, and the Brad Pitts of the world have a child, Shiloh, that I had at first identified as being a trans person. What do we know about Megan's kids? She has 3 boys. And there have been some pictures floating around in newspapers or online of how perhaps one or more of her boys dress in an alternative manner, i.e. they don't dress like boys. They don't dress like boys, right? they might adorn their body in a more feminine kind of a way. So maybe, for example, they're not wearing dresses, but maybe they have long hair, and maybe they're wearing pastel color clothing. So what was shown to me is that her boys dressing this way is not because they are being agendized. Again, she's worth $8 million. It's not the hundreds of millions of dollars that other celebrities that are in fact being agendized are worth. This is, to me, again, a further indication of the fact that because she is so energetically porous, she is open to the changing societal norms, and she considers herself to be more progressive, and therefore being a progressive mom, and this being something that's very big and notable out on the world stage, she just is open to it. She's open-minded to it. So if her boys want to adorn their body one way or another, she's like, yeah, cool, whatever. Like, this is the thing. People are doing it. Like, cool, you do it. I'm progressive. It's a thing. Whatever. More power to everybody that's involved. But I did not, in fact, see this as her being agendized. Now, interestingly enough, what was also shown to me is that prior to Machine Gun Kelly and Megan getting involved, she did not share lots and lots and lots about her relationship. No, she was in fact relatively mum about her prior and long-lasting relationship with Brian Austin Green. So her leading a more simple and quiet life with Brian Austin Green was actually shown to me as her rebelling against what was expected of her, which is that she's like this sex symbol, right? Like, she just wakes up in the morning. She doesn't have like morning breath. She doesn't need a shower. She doesn't need a bathe. Like, she just oozes sex appeal. Like, she just concluded a 10-hour road trip, and it's like, no, honey, I don't need to stop and use the ladies' room. I need you to pull me into the restroom and fuck my brains out. Like, this is literally what her representation on the world stage has been. It's completely not realistic, though. So her leading a very quiet and normal life was her rebelling against what was expected of her to be a sex symbol. And in addition to that, she married young, and she had 3 kids at a relatively young age. She also shared with me she married, her word, vanilla, Brian Austin Green, because he was not threatening to her, and he did not ever objectify her, and certainly he never objectified her sexually, and she sought to settle down and to be the opposite of what the world thought her to be, and to live her life privately. But it was a rebellion. Megan was going through her rebellious stage, if you will. But that all changed when she met Machine Gun Kelly. So why were these two so deeply changed once they met one another? Here's why. Imagine holding a big ass motherfucking mirror up against the sun. The mirror would amplify the sun's brightness, and it would blow everything else out of the way and out of sight. So if you've ever looked at the sun for any period of time, especially a prolonged period of time, you may have experienced a feeling of temporarily blindness, or seeing like dots all over your eyes, right? Now that is just if you looked at the actual sun. So imagine in amplification and expansion of its reflection on a big ass motherfucking scale. And because Megan is energetically porous because of her sex symbol status, Megan is in fact like a mirror, energetically, open and receiving all of the sexual fantasies that were foisted upon her. That's on a large scale. But interpersonally and on a romantic partnership level, it very much functions the same way. So she, as the energetic mirror, has enhanced both of their own internal kookiness and dancing to the beat of their own drummer. So some of the things that were deeply hidden inside of themselves individually came to the surface for them to explore with one another. And some of these things that were of a deeply hidden nature are these so-called fucked up things. We will explore those fucked up things later. I'm just explaining to you on what has changed with them on a fundamental level once these two came together. Laying the foundation, if you will. So again, what would happen if a mirror was held up to the sun? Whatever the mirror is held up to would be enhanced. In this case, it's held up to the sun, so the reflection of the brightness of the sun would be enhanced. And to one another, they were very much the sun. So to Megan, Machine Gun Kelly was the sun, and to Machine Gun Kelly, Megan was the sun. And just as the sun is the center of our solar system, they became the center of one another's focal point as well. Because once they met, it was like they realized their entire world and their entire lives had been lived in black and white. And it was only once they saw one another that they were only actually living in color. Because their point of focus, which was one another, was in color, while everything else around them was in black and white. So when Megan met Machine Gun Kelly, he was in color, and suddenly everything else around her faded to black and white. And ditto for Machine Gun Kelly. And thus, finding one another started to infuse color into all other aspects of their lives as well. So imagine wandering in a desert for days and days and days on end and encountering mirage after mirage after mirage, never actually getting to the water. Only at a certain point to in fact find the water. So much of their lives prior to meeting one another was a series of mirages, if you will, and false starts. But they were the actual water to one another that they had been searching for. So it was like they had searched their whole lives for one another without knowing it was one another that they had been searching for. And suddenly this too dark world where everything had been in black and white was finally in color. They found their sun, if you will. And that amplified the kookiness inside of them. And thus, once they found each other in this too dark world where they were thirsty and had a series of false starts, they finally found their water, they finally had color, and it was because they had met one another. So they equally thirsted for one another, and they equally worshipped one another. So from Machine Gun Kelly's perspective, Megan was Venus come to life. Not the planet, the painting. Megan was Venus de Milo come to life. Because she was a mother, a real woman from his perspective. Because the others, I remind you, were all mirages to him. And she was to him a goddess. So he worshipped her through his love languages, which are positive words, positive affirmations, and telling her how beautiful and incredible she was by spending lots and lots of quality time with her, and physical affection, i.e. sex. Lots and lots and lots of sex. For Megan, Machine Gun Kelly was her king. Because after being with, again, her word, not mine, vanilla Brian, Machine Gun Kelly was exactly the dose of masculinity she needed. Plus, Machine Gun Kelly is insanely tall. And yes, believe it or not, this actually matters. He is hella fucking tall, well over 6 feet, and she is not. So for her, physically looking up to a man that tall also translated to energetically looking up to him. And after her being looked up to as a sex symbol for much of her adult life, she rather liked being the one to do the looking up to. She worshipped Machine Gun Kelly's with her love languages, which are positive words, positive affirmations, spending quality time together, and physical affection, i.e. sex. Lots and lots and lots of sex. And remember, because Megan is a mirror, she amplified Machine Gun Kelly's love language, which happened to be the same as hers. So in terms of love languages, these two are complementary because they both express love to their partner and receive love from their partner in the same and complementary way. So they show it the way they need it to be received, and they both show and receive it in the exact same way. However, interestingly enough, despite them being incredibly compatible in terms of their love languages, they were not shown to me as being so-called two peas in a pod, but rather two rocks with complementary hard angles that fit together. These two are not gentle little lambs that are all soft and cuddly. No. They could both be prickly and prone to prickliness, but in their own ways. But those ways happen to have been complementary. So Machine Gun Kelly was shown to me as being prone to depression, or depression light, if you will, because it was not full-on depression that is debilitating, thus that would merit medication to even him out. But rather, it was shown to me as being periods of extreme out-of-sortedness, wherein he felt out of alignment with his life and his place within it. Now, I'm not saying that those are the words that he's going to use, where he's going to be saying, I feel so out of alignment with my life and my place in it. No. He felt out of place in his life. And because I remind you, he is not a talk through the problem kind of a man, but rather a retreat into his innermost and hidden and protected bowels of his soul kind of a man that can transmute that shit on his own. That's exactly what he did. So when he would go through these periods of depression or depression light where he was feeling out of alignment, he would shut himself down and become extremely withdrawn. So like a really, really, really intense form of hermiting, if you will. So he himself could set himself right again. But in order to be able to do that, he had to withdraw from the world and shut himself down first, so that he could retreat into the innermost hidden and protected bowels of his soul, so he could transmute that shit on his own. And even though it was never done maliciously or to keep a partner away or to keep a partner feeling stable or secure, a la, for example, a Chris Brown. And if you have seen my video on Chris Brown, you will remember that I had shared Chris would go through periods, not where he had to shut himself down so he could write himself. No, he would just be incommunicado with Rihanna for a couple of days to leave her feeling like unbalanced. It was like a game. And if you have not yet seen the video that I had done on Chris Brown, I have linked it down below if you do want to go back and watch it. But Machine Gun Kelly wasn't doing it for that reason. But here's the thing. Even if that wasn't the intention behind it, some girls that he had been involved with could not weather that storm, even knowing that it was temporary. Because to a younger girl whose whole life, for example, would have been Machine Gun Kelly, having a partner that went through these periods where they would retract into themselves would leave them feeling identityless. And thus, to somebody like that, this would be a non-negotiable. But Megan already has a life of her own. And she has kids and responsibilities. So when Machine Gun Kelly had to withdraw, Megan, being a fully developed woman with a life of her own, got it. And she immersed herself back into her own life. Because this was also not her first relationship that she had ever had. She had been in an over decade-long marriage prior. So she understood that sometimes your partner needing space did not indicate that this is not a healthy relationship, but rather it was one partner feeling safe enough and seen enough to express their needs to the other. So her being cool with it was another point that Machine Gun Kelly really liked about her. She fucking got it. You do you, boo. I got my own life I can go back to. Now, Megan too could also be prickly. Hers, however, showed up as her acting like a diva. And this would happen when she herself was feeling out of sorts. Because again, Megan is already somebody that is very energetically porous. So she, if you will, is more akin to an extrovert needing feedback from the outside world to regulate herself. Kelly, Machine Gun Kelly, is actually the opposite. He's more akin to an introvert who withdraws from the world and hermits. Not Megan, she's his opposite. And just like lizards are cold-blooded creatures that need to sit out in the sun to generate warmth because they themselves cannot do it internally, Megan too sometimes lacked the ability to regulate herself. So thus, she would act out, and through the feedback she would receive, could co-regulate herself. So once it was pointed out to her that her behavior was in fact over the top, then she would know, I've gone too far this time. And thus she would know for next time not necessarily to go so far in the same expression. She might go too far in a different way, but it wouldn't be the exact same way. Because she needs to receive feedback from the external world so that she can co-regulate her own internal system through her understanding of the external feedback that she receives. This is also why Megan gained a reputation as being difficult to work with. Because if she was feeling overwhelmed or emotionally dysregulated or self-conscious or insecure while she was on set, her inner diva came to the surface to emotionally protect her against the way in which she felt uncomfortable because she couldn't regulate herself. But Machine Gun Kelly could weather that storm because he already worshipped her. And no, not in a, I'm going to go to your altar and light incense and pray kind of a way. No. He already worshipped her by constantly telling her how amazing she was, how incredible she was, because that was his love language. Naturally, he would do it. So he was unknowingly getting out ahead of any potential emotional dysregulation flare-ups that Megan might actually experience. But he was doing it organically because it's naturally his love language. So far, so good for these two, right? So these two found another in a too dark world and experienced light in their life because of it. Their relationship also felt like finally finding water after mirage, And they aligned in terms of their love languages. And even their prickly parts lined up. Plus, they feel at home and they feel safe with one another. So are they in fact twin flames? So let's first explore what a so-called twin flame is. And to do so, I actually once again consulted Google. But interestingly enough, if you go to Google, Google doesn't have, you know, like sometimes you ask a question and like an answer pops up right at the bottom. Not in the case of looking for what a twin flame is. So I was going through article after article after article, looking for a reputable, if you will, site that wasn't trying to, you know, like sell you like a spell or a love potion to find and attract your twin flame in, or giving you like these completely idiotic, like woo-woo over the top, 2% personal opinion, like completely idiotic and woo-woo over the top explanations of what a twin flame is. So I actually had to go through a number of sites to find a reputable one. And according to the website Mind Body Green, a twin flame is an intense soul connection with someone sought to be a person's other half, or mirror soul, and is based on the idea that someone's one soul gets split into two separate and distinct bodies. And herein lies why I myself, for example, do not believe in the concept as we know it of so-called twin flames, because this is just another way in which we are being kept down. We are not whole until we find our twin flame. Never you mind the fact that you're already whole and complete in your own right. Until you find your twin flame, you're not complete because your soul was split into two. Okay. Because that explanation is just another way to disempower us and make us feel incomplete in our own right. Now, this particular article in Mind, Body, and Green did in fact point out that each person is still whole in their own right, and that a twin flame is only meant to encourage the person to be complete by showing us our deepest fears so that we can overcome them. But here's the thing. How many articles don't share that bit? Because how many articles did I have to go through until I found a reputable one that actually points that out? So how many people are going around living their lives truly and genuinely feeling like they are incomplete because they haven't found their twin flame? So, labels aside, let's explore, now that we've identified what a so-called twin flame is, but we're going to take the label out of it, right? We're going to say, this is an intense soul connection. So labels aside, let's explore further behind the veil aspects, because that's what you guys are here for. You're here for the goods that the guides bring. You're not here for me to tell you what Wikipedia says or what Mind Body Green says or what woo-woo fucking websites and articles on the internet tell you. You can find that shit on your own. You are here to learn what is going on behind the veil between these two, labels aside. So, let's explore further aspects to Machine Gun Kelly and Megan's energies that comprise the fabric of their particular relationship behind the veil. What was shown to me is that they have something of a deep soul connection that has been forged over many lifetimes. Were they always in romantic partnerships? No. Sometimes they were in fact lovers, but they were also brothers, twins, who literally came into the world together, enemies on a battlefield shedding one another's blood, generals going head to head, sparring partners in a training ring, helping one another hone their skills, as well as best friends. And interestingly and notable, even the fact that they got engaged when Venus was in retrograde is an indication of their unfinished love life coming to the fore. So the fact that they got engaged when Venus, which is the so-called planet of love and romance, was in retrograde, well, it seems to shout that these two, because when you think about like a planet being in retrograde, they'll say, well, it's not really a favorable energy to start something new, right? Like, and Mercury is in retrograde, the planet of communication. Like, don't start a new blog, don't start like a YouTube channel, like, don't start new projects. Retrograde energy is actually a favorable energy to like go back and look at things that you have thought about doing in the past, not starting something new. So, well, to those in the astrology community might look at the fact that they got engaged when Venus was in retrograde and they're going to say, holy fucking hell, this relationship is not going to last. What them getting engaged during Venus in retrograde actually indicates is beyond the fact that these two have a romantic relationship together. And it does not necessarily indicate that it will not last because they chose to get engaged during that time. Because if you break it down and you look at what it actually is, it's the planet of love was moving backwards. And what is another representation of something that is backwards or behind you? Previous lifetimes. So it's actually an indication that these two have unfinished business from previous lifetimes to work through in this current incarnation. It doesn't necessarily mean because they got engaged when Venus is in retrograde that they're not going to fucking last. There's other reasons that might be the case. It's sure as hell not because Venus was in retrograde. Venus in retrograde is indicating that things from the past, i.e. former lives that these two had together, has unresolved karma to work through. And this is why when they met, they saw one another so clearly and saw one another in color, because it was their soul's recognition of each other from their past. And because they had so many lifetimes together in different configurations and different ways, many in which they were close, those lifetimes acted like fibers on a rope, further binding them together. So they are in fact karmically connected through the lifetimes that they have shared. And the accumulation of karmic shit for them to work through. Because those lifetimes included love, but also loss, battles and death, pain and suffering inflicted on one to the other, but also sex, companionship, romance, and deep friendship. So the fucked up shit they are into is actually a 3D manifestation of the lifetimes, previous lifetimes they shared, playing out in this one particular lifetime. Because now that they found each other once again and once more, they're working through all that karmic shit. So when Megan did an interview and shared that they drink one another's blood, it's actually because in previous lifetimes they have spilled one another's blood on the battlefield or in the training rink. But in this life, this current incarnation, the blood is to give life to one another and not to take it away, because they freely share it with one another. And the engagement ring that Machine Gun Kelly gave Megan that has like spikes on it, so that if she tries to take the engagement ring off, would actually make her bleed. To them, it represents their commitment to one another and to be together in this lifetime at all costs. Again, I remind you, this is not a relationship that will make sense to an outsider looking in. Just like to us, earthbound people, surviving in water, like fish do, is not how we would survive. So to these two that are of a complementary nature, not just complementary, but working through the karmic shit of previous incarnations they've shared together, on a 3D level in this lifetime, the ring also satisfies Machine Gun Kelly's alpha status and his need to mark Megan as his woman. And it also satisfies Megan's need to be with an alpha that will take ownership over his woman. It bothers her not one bit. Not the engagement ring that's going to make her bleed if she tries to take it off. Not him marking her, if you will, as his own. That bothers her not one bit. In fact, it's what she craved. To be owned, if you will. Because Brian was too genteel with her and to her. And she always felt she needed to be with a slightly more aggressive man. But she was in her rebellion period back then, no longer. Now, what is some of the other fucked up shit that they are into? And this is not throwing shade at anyone who's into this. I'm more saying, if you will, like tongue-in-cheek, like this is fucked up shit. I pass no judgment here. So if this is your particular predilection, you do you, boo. It's just more to say that as an outsider looking in, some might consider this to be fucked up. Not that I personally do. But some of the other so-called fucked up shit that they are into, tying one another up. And while it's mostly Machine Gun Kelly that is tying Megan up, on occasion, she ties him up as well. And they play out each other's fantasies. They both enjoy sexual kink. And I personally am very fucking happy for them. But the tying one another up and sharing one another's fantasies also, in fact, signifies something more. Trust. Because Megan trusts Kelly to keep her safe while she is in a deeply vulnerable state. Because a woman that is tied up, and I'm not actually in fact going to limit it to just when a woman is tied up, but it would certainly make it a lot easier if a woman was tied up. She can be seriously hurt, sexually taken advantage of, starved, beaten, and even unalived. But Kelly does none of those things to Megan. Unless it is something that they have agreed upon in advance, and she trusts him to only do what they agreed upon and nothing more. So these two have a real trust in one another. Because think about it. In your own life, do you have anyone, or have you ever had anyone, that you would in fact trust to tie you up? Or is there someone that you could confide your deepest, darkest sexual fantasies with, that person would not scoff at you, or ridicule you, or tell you you're a fucking freak because that's what you want sexually? So the fact that these two do is in expression of their similar sexual interests, their sexual chemistry, plus their love and trust. So the real question then, aside from the label of are they in fact twin flames, the real question may be the long-term prognosis of Machine Gun Kelly and Megan Fox. Will they last? So first of all, no one knows that. Not yet, and certainly not even then. Because, I remind you, free will reigns supreme. They both have it, and they can both exercise it in any number of ways that could either end the relationship outright, or it could threaten it on such a deep, fundamental emotional level that either one or both of them cannot come back from it. This is where I'm also going to share with you that if there has been allegations of infidelity that Machine Gun Kelly has acted upon, i.e. he was not sexually faithful to Megan, this was shown to me as being similar to his so-called release valve and tattoos. Because what they have is so deep and intense, and that intensity and all of the current emotions of not just this lifetime and finding one another, but the past karmic shit and their soul's recognition of all of that is sometimes a lot. And since Machine Gun Kelly is not a talker kind of a type, right? He won't necessarily talk it out, but he feels it and he knows it. And he may on occasion feel he needs a meaningless dalliance to release all of that pent-up energy and have something that is just light, where he doesn't feel a constant reminder on a daily basis of all of that fucking karmic shit, whether it's on a conscious or a subconscious level. But if he has had purely physical dalliances on the side, that shit will not end them. It may not feel good for Megan to know about it, but it won't sink them. But in an emotional affair, absolutely will. So there are lots of ways that their individual free will could play out and what that means for the relationship. But no one knows, because not all of their choices have been made yet. And as more and more comes up for these two, more and more choices will have to be made between them. But outside of that, a deep thirst can be quenched by water. But that same water can drown a person. So now that they have found one another in this lifetime, will they sip from the cup, or will they guzzle and end up drowning in it instead? And that is certainly something I don't know. But you tell me, what do you think? Are these two meant to last, or will the flame of their so-called twin flame fizzle out? That is what I have for you on the reading of Machine Gun Kelly and Megan Fox. I'm curious to hear your take on it, so please do feel free to comment down below. And I hope that you have found this video to be interesting and insightful, perhaps even thought-provoking. And to remind you to please take what resonates and leave the rest behind. And as always, and until next time, stay in the high vibration.